Welcome back, folks. Good morning, evening, good night. Wherever you are, whatever you're doing, thank you very much for joining me. For you, it may have been some time, but for me, it was a little over an hour ago, and I'm sorry for cutting things short earlier. I just couldn't stay in here with that thing. I don't know if it's gone, to tell you the truth, but I can't see it and I can't hear it. Not that anywhere else in this house is much better. Smells everywhere now, and at first it was just disgusting, but that was when I could still bring myself to go outside, and even then there was no real relief from it. It's that thick stalker smell mixed with my stepfather's cologne, and together it's so strong that it's just robbed me of any taste whatsoever. I can't enjoy food anymore. My kitchen, speaking to that, I was so proud of it. It was my favorite room in the house. It was where I could just create flavor and find... I don't want to think about that. It's overflowing with trash now. There's bags, and I mean, I do know what I need to do. I know what I need to do. I need to take them outside, but I can't. And I tried to ask a delivery driver for help the other day, and he very politely shook his head. Understandably so. And I won't throw them out of the window. I won't do that. You know, I can still look at my garden. I can't throw them out the back window because I can look at my garden at least. It's beautiful and it's growing even without me. Take me out of the equation and it's still growing. And if I start to send what's in here out there, will it stop growing? I don't want that. I don't want that because I don't want the degradation of inside to spread, because I don't shower anymore. I don't look after myself. And these moments when I'm talking, it's where I'm lucid enough to talk. It's where I find a lucidity. And by talking, this has always been the case. When I talk, this isn't there. I stay bright-eyed when I talk. I look forward to this, and more it feels like it's falling away from me, and it becomes more difficult to look forward to because I don't know when I'm going to be able to do it, because it's like I'm drunk all day through in just this dirty haze and completely exhausted. Because I don't really sleep now. When I lay my head down on the pillow, I know that I don't rest because the dream is always the same and I don't forget it. It's the forest. That forest that I saw when I was just outside of Dublin, and I'm fleeing through it, or somebody is fleeing through it, capturing glimpses of what's in my periphery, and it's just dark, lumpen, misshapen things that move so fast, faster than something so twisted has any right to. And I'm rushing away, rushing, but it's also toward the tree. That tree that I've always seen, and I'm not even sure after a lifetime of seeing it now that it's a tree at all. I don't know what it is. Maybe my brain's only seeing it as a tree because of its shape. Maybe it's filling the gaps around it and says, this is a tree to keep me sane. It finds a pattern it knows, and that pattern protects me. So I've been robbed of the only peace I get outside of talking and researching desperately. And this is a necessity. This is work. It may make me lucid, but it does not make me peaceful. Because I'm so tired because I dream so deeply and so strongly that my body is physically tired from sprinting. And the ghosts are getting louder too. My stepfather, John's voice, it was distant. It was behind closed doors. It was mumbled. But now, so when I took this break, I went away, and I think it was an hour ago. It could have been longer. I don't know. It could have been yesterday. It could have been 2 days ago. It's like my mind lives in an hourglass and the sands are constantly falling one way or the other. I don't feel that length of time anymore. It's like everything is both pulling apart and snapping together at the same time. But anyway, I was staring to the mirror. I went to the bathroom and I was in there and I was trying to force myself to shave. I was trying to brush my teeth. I was trying to muster up the energy to just grab a toothbrush and find some dignity. And in that, I threw water on my face in frustration to clear this fog on my brain, and I swore. And I remember grabbing the sink, and then I stopped myself because I was lashing out blindly, and that's not what I do. That is not a thing that I do. So I remember grabbing the sink, realizing that I was about to pull back and do something really, really stupid. And so I just swore, grabbed a towel, took a deep breath, pulled myself upright and wiped my face. And it was in that blind second that I heard the scuttle of feet on bathroom tiles. And then there's this hand on my bare shoulder, and it's unkind, and it's rough, and it's squeezing. And he's whispering into my ear, and I can't make anything out that he says because it's vile, it's horrible, it's guttural and low. I can understand that it is the kind of awful things that he would have said to me when he was alive. I know the intent, but I can't make out the words because it's gargled, because I can see him in the mirror and he's saying it with a dented throat, where his neck snapped over the steering wheel the day he died. And I don't see him clearly. I see him through this condensation has just covered the mirror. It's cold in the room and his spittle's flicking against my cheek, and I cried. And I didn't sob. It was just a grinding tear that worked its way down my nose, and I couldn't move. It was like the time in the bath when I sank beneath the water. I couldn't move. I had no control whatsoever. It's like sleep paralysis, but I'm standing upright. And then I blinked and he was gone. And I didn't move. I didn't move for a long time. And I didn't even blink. Just in case he came back. I thought I was used to the terror in this fucking place. Much just like I thought I was used to the violence when he was alive. It's the background music to your life, right? It never should be, but when it is, you barely register it. And much like violence, it can always get more raw. It can, no matter how comfortable you are, it can always shock you. And this, with the greatest of understatement, I didn't like this at all. So I had to talk about that. I didn't want to. I had to. I wanted to try and forget it, but it needs to be told because there's another side to it. There's always a flip side to things. I'm standing there with absolutely no control over myself, utterly ripped to the guts with fear. On some level, a really deep level, mind you, I realize that I still care. Even if I'm dazed, even if I'm completely out of energy, there's a deeper part of me that is just screaming out to survive this. And that gives me hope. As ludicrous as it is, as small as it is, I'll take it. I will absolutely take it. But I had to talk about that. I had to. Before I go back to delving into mind flow and our deep dive into this cult. So we've established who these people are, but where did they come from? I mean, last time we talked about Harry Nolan, that failed YouTuber turned stalker, and how that memory of his fall from grace connected my brain from seeing him in Dublin to this breathing app. So there's not really much more to say about that. There's a lot to kind of be said for how did he become what he is now, and we can look into that. But honestly, he could be anybody. He is not important. Who he is not important to me at all. What is important to me is the origins of the group and their secrets. Also, can I just say that Harry Nolan would hate that? And that gives me a little smile. He would hate that I completely diminish his part in this as an individual. So, yeah, I'll take it. And as mentioned, I've been using a lot of YouTube videos to inform this. They're all scattered about. The ones that weren't taken down all handle kind of different aspects of this. So this is kind of an amalgamation of drama YouTube videos over the past, over 10 years now, really. Some articles that I've read that were critical alongside news articles, and some very trusted sources. And I'm not going to talk about those trusted sources yet, because I think that if I did, that would become the focus here. And I'm not ready for that to become the focus. I have to start at the beginning. So let's start with Sax Gustafson, the face of Mindflow. So this dude is just one of those people who just won't stop. He's a relentless failure with a trail of failed business ideas, each one more stupid than the last. But more than that, a powerful need for attention and narcissism kept him in the game. Investors absolutely loved him, despite the obvious signs of him being a pure strain bullshitter and verifiable failure. He's got that kind of charisma that can charm the money out of the pockets of the rich and clueless. But if he asked you or me for change in the street, you would flip him off. So for years, he kind of bounced around trying to find his niche, which is something that you can do when your parents are millionaires. When you're born into wealth, you can do that. And they always ask, why don't you simply do this? They were like, you just simply need to get it. It's insane. It's an insane thing that most people cannot do. So he's able to just kind of like flail around failing for years and still live comfortably. He never knows true hardship. A whole rack of flops, way too many to count. But I think this sums up who he is and how little he thinks of other people and the actual problems that he's trying to solve. So my favorite thing, and when I say favorite, I use the term very loosely because I hate this, but it was Calipay. So way back when, he had factories putting together mobile phones, and these were based in the US. And this was another thing that he completely screwed up, by the way. He demanded that the phones not have dial pads on them at a time when touchscreen technology wasn't great. And people hated that. And so his way around that was to say, like, hey, you can just say a name and it'll call somebody. You'll save time. That's, yeah, great. Good luck setting that up for all the contacts you have in 2003 with a clunky piece of garbage that has 2 hours of battery life. So there you go. There's a free failure thrown in on top. You know, buy one, get one free, I guess. Anyway, as dumb as that sounds, it's nowhere near as dumb as this. So he proposed paying the workers in those factories in calories, like actual food, to meet their basic needs. And the way he positioned this was, working in my factories as a side job that would allow people to spend their money on better things. Utterly without thought, no filter, straight from the horse's ass to being put in trials, and you can't do that. You pay people money, otherwise they're slaves. You're giving them calories to work for you. That's not a reward. It's just zany stuff. And of course, there was no side job there, because if someone worked in his factory, they had no time to work anywhere else after a 12-hour shift. So this was insane. There was a lot of lawsuits brought by the workers themselves who had this imposed upon them. And that opened up doors to a lot of other things, and everything kind of collapsed. So after this absolute shit show, he went away for a little while. And in the lore of Mindflow as a business, it's framed as, and I quote, "After developing several businesses and creating thousands of jobs, Saxon wasn't done. He knew that his story was just beginning." I mean, Jesus Christ. Line that up with what I just told you about. It's insane stuff. So he takes off for a while. And you can tell by my voice that talking about this is just, it's rare to kind of like find something where I'm like, oh, this is just normal human idiocy. And God, engaging with it, it's a delight. But anyway, so this dude, he takes off a while to find inner peace. And in older versions of this story, because I've seen a few of them, he basically lives out the plot of Batman Begins. You know, he travels the East in search of peace and finds many people willing to kind of share their kind of like techniques with him. Awful nonsense. In more modern retellings of this, it just skips all that, and yoga just becomes his idea. It's something he came up with, I guess. I mean, he was friends with a whole bunch of rich dickheads, and they all got together. And at this party, one of them suffered a panic attack. And he thought there and then, what if we all breathe together? And so they shared this panic attack breathing that his friend had. His friend calmed down, and then everybody started breathing together afterwards. You know, from that moment, a shared kind of experience was created, and they all loved it so much that they begged him to turn it into a brand, and he did. I would bet any amount of money. I would bet like my life, my house, my cursed house. I would bet my cursed house that did not happen, because it's absolutely ludicrous. But that second story, despite coming a little bit later and being gibberish, it rings more true. And it's not totally true, but he was definitely with people because he was given this. This was something where he went away, and when he came back, it was pretty much the basics of it were almost fully formed, and it was pretty much baked, and he was just the delivery guy. Because this is also the time when he starts meeting with GF Capital. If you remember, those are the people who funded our good friend Nolan's YouTube career. His parents very, very heavily involved in that. Very old money, very refined, very into venture capital. And they'd funded his disastrous kind of foray into telecommunications. And it was after meetings with them that he came back and this was kind of formed. And at first, that wasn't even an app. There was no phones that could support this, really. It was just online. It was messaging groups, very minor social media campaigns because it was in its infancy. But it's very much a kind of word of mouth thing. You know, online groups, self-help videos, all about developing that parasocial relationship between people eager for something new to believe in, something new and something selfish, something that was more about them than anything else, about improving their lives and their experience. And they wanted to hear something new in that regard from somebody eager to dole it out to them. So it just hit at the perfect time, really. So, and those grossly ignorant elements of Mindflow, they developed over time. You know, there was none of this, welcome to Western culture, where we're here to protect it. Like, you know, there was none of that. Initially, it was just about meditation and mindfulness. But when it began to lean into that refined by the West hyper-traditionalist angle, that's when it really took off. And this was never huge, mind you. I said before, even the app has never been successful. It consistently makes no money, but it had an audience, not a massive audience. Instead, it built a core of true believers and what I'm going to call, for want of a better term, the racist curious. So Mindflow became this weird techno-naturalist trad Nordic melting pot of awful ideas. And that's also where they kind of picked up on their magic ingredient, which you see everywhere. And that is letting people believe that it's all about whatever they want it to be about. And if you're vague enough, it can be about absolutely anything. Back in 2005, a long time before the app existed, they would do timed sessions where members would perform breathing exercises to a recording on a CD that they would have to purchase for a grossly inflated price at specific times. And those times would be posted up for the week on the main website. And it would foster a sense of closeness among the members. And this led to in-person gatherings, the FlowCons, where people would meet and bond and share a breath together. And those gatherings are where people really, really became diehards. Because when you get people together in a group and they're doing a shared activity, there's that real sense of belonging and you become a tribe. And it pulled all of them together. And there's few things that are more intimate than a shared breath, especially when you have it in a group of hundreds. It's very quiet, it's very kind of peaceful, and there's a feeling of being something much, much greater than yourself, but also kind of calm and relatable, and like you're connected to the people in a very kind of tactile way. And people couldn't get enough. The people who attended these couldn't get enough. And there were enough rich people there and there were enough media people there that Gustafsson was hailed as a genius. Even though most of the ideas that he had were incredibly basic and seemed to have been handed to him on a plate before this began. And the wider ideas were being made up on the fly by the members themselves. And he and his leadership team would just nod whenever they heard something that sounded right and be like, excellent. Yeah, that's exactly what we mean. So the easiest job in the world, basically. You would have people coming up with their own company that they wanted, and you would just say, yeah, that's what we do. Please give me another $100. And that person would be like, oh, wow, amazing. Here you go. And then somebody could say something completely opposed to it, something the exact opposite, and you would just say the same, and you would get their money as well. And if you ever put this to those two people, they would say, well, that can't be right, and ignore you, because that's how these things work. That's the insidious part of them. They break people's sense of reality. And there's one element, though, that was always top down and central to the system from the very start. And that's where a lot of the kind of the talk of traditional and Western values actually came from, I think, is this. Because central to the system was Norse mythology. They focused very heavily on ancient wisdom and the strength of the Vikings, not in the literal sense, but to give it mysticism. Because these kind of groups, they really do need to have something greater baked in as they lurch from being a kind of get together of people to becoming a cult. And Mindflow was very heavily focused on the concept of Yggdrasil, the world tree that winds between realms. So members would be asked to visualize this whenever they joined a session. They would get together and they would be encouraged to focus on the world tree in their minds, their Yggdrasil, to draw it, to describe it, share their visions with the group of where the branches went off to and what they saw. And it was during those early gatherings that things got quite dark for some people. Breathing exercises, when I looked into this myself, when I first experienced what I experienced, breathing exercises are not inherently dangerous, but there are risks to them if you do it incorrectly. And there's nothing about this that tells me that they had the well-being of people attending these events in mind. And people became disturbed at these events. Some saw things, some heard things that would continue even after they'd stopped the breathing sessions, and they would have to step away. There were reports of serious mental distress among certain participants, but not everybody left. Some people would experience that, and it became part of the core philosophy. That's where the masculinity element started to rear its head here, that kind of traditional strong values, because they would shun people who would flag that they were distressed. They were portrayed as weak, and the group would isolate them, shun them, cut them off from their community. And all of this was done just to shut down people who were legitimately suffering or brushing up against something that their minds couldn't quite understand, and they were asking for help and they did not get it. So you would have people, there has to be cases of people who wanted to leave but didn't and stayed. But as I'll talk about, there is not a lot of chatter from people who leave the group. But what's horrible to me is just thinking that somebody is in distress, they're uncomfortable, and they say, I don't want to be here anymore. And everyone around them, all of their friends, everybody that they know in this community that they've built says, you're weak, you're a coward. If you leave now, you'll have nothing. And so, because of this, peer pressure undersells it. Everyone thinks peer pressure is like at school, like, oh, you're peer pressured into taking drugs. There is a weight to social pressure. There is a real weight to social pressure. So there would be people who are forcing themselves to suffer because of this. And to me, that is absolutely disgusting, because it robs people of their ability to consent to what is happening. If there is a group consensus and you don't want it, but you go along with it anyway because of the group, that is not true consent to my mind. And I find it a very, very ugly thing. But after the Flocons became a fixture, and after this kind of aggressive control became central to things, they started establishing retreats, buying up land, inviting members to get together in person throughout the year. And so right now, this is a bunch of tacked together ideas, right? At that time, it was a bunch of tacked together ideas built around shared breathing with the World Tree as a focal point and fanatical true believers. And all three of those things, before I continue here, I can easily extrapolate out to what's happening to me today. There'll be some stretching to get there, but not by much. If you've been with me on this journey and I said to you, shared breathing, World Tree, fanatics, you would recognize those three things. And even saying it sends a little shudder up my spine there. So there's a pattern. Again, here, there are three things that we can take from this and plant in the modern day. But I don't want to get too far off track here. In 2008, those gatherings, which is what they became known as, just the gatherings, would happen more often. And these groups would develop laws within themselves. There would be wider laws throughout the organization, but there would be laws within the groups, and it was always weird stuff. It was always controlling stuff. It was the kind of thing where it would seem harmless at first, and then quickly people would notice that they're quite bad. I mean, not within the groups, because they would have that kind of like frogs in boiling water problem where they wouldn't realize what's going on. So, for example, an example of this, which anybody listening to this will say, like, well, that's not going to end well, is the oaths of dedication. So what they would do is at dawn, they would say, how are you going to better yourself and the world today? And everybody would go around and everyone would give an oath. They would say a declaration. And then at dusk, they would ask, did you walk your path? Did you fulfill your oath? And if you failed, it's just a fun little ribbing and a bit of a challenge to do better tomorrow, right? Like, you know, kind of like no harm, no foul. Oh, you didn't do this, but we did. So that's it. You can imagine there's no way that that could be taken wrong, right? There's no way. Well, no, absolutely not. It's not how it went down. There was no fun. Failure was treated with ridicule and contempt, and then punishment. Cruelty, in other words. People with the slightest power over other people began abusing it. It wasn't about service to yourself or the world around you, or even other people at the gatherings, but to the local cult leaders. And that was encouraged by the higher-ups because, from what investigators uncovered, they were absolutely the worst of the lot. Rather than tormenting individuals, they would torment the entire group. The leaders were experiencing the same thing that they would which they were putting onto the people beneath them. Just a horrible Horrible system. So just some examples like of some of the punishments and some of the common punishments that they had. One was hot cupping, where boiling water gets poured into cups and the oath breakers, fun name, have to hold the cup in the palms of their hands and just hold it for as long as they possibly can. Horrible. Other ones, stepping, where they would lie down on the floor and other members would dance around them. And if they get stepped on, they better stay quiet and they shouldn't have broken their oath. And let me tell you, I'm pretty sure that the people doing that were not the kind of people to be like, oh, let's make sure we don't kind of step on them. Let's make sure we don't hurt them. No, it's just mean-spirited, awful nonsense. And one of them here, I'll just say, it makes me feel pretty sick, to be honest. It's not graphic at all. It's not a graphic description. Please don't worry about that. It's just senseless. So senseless. There was one guy who, he pledged in the morning he would clean the pots and pans, but in the day, he took a bad fall. Twisted his ankle, could not manage to do that. And so at dusk, he admitted he'd failed. He got a perfectly reasonable excuse. He got a messed up ankle. He thought it was all going to be, yeah, well, that's fair. That's understandable. Instead, they told him that his pain was an illusion, but his laziness was a choice. They forcefully tied one hand behind his back and made him start tidying the entire camp. And the moment they kind of stepped away from him, he said, no, fuck this and fuck you. I'm leaving. I'm leaving. And he managed to get his other hand free. He grabbed his stuff and went over to his car, which was not there. So he was arguing and, his car wasn't there, whatever. So he went back and he said, well, tomorrow I'm getting this. And the people at the camp said, no, you're not welcome here. You're not welcome. This is our land up to here and you're not welcome on our land. Get the hell out. So this is in the middle of the woods. Far away from, kind of anything really. There's kind of ways to drive out and you kind of followed the roads, but on a twisted ankle, walking a long path. He did not make it home. He died alone on the side of the road, and we'll never know what happened. We'll never know exactly what happened there or how he felt in his final moments. But it's such a pointless death, right, for anybody, and it's entirely avoidable. Just callous. And once again, it's just like Nolan's dead girlfriend and her family. There was no justice for this man. The story I just told about a man's death, it's a matter of record. They let an injured man walk off to die. And some people at that gathering broke ranks and spoke out because they too were very disturbed, and they spoke out to counter any attempt to undermine this guy or paint him as a problem or a villain. They said he did nothing wrong. But because money talks, Mindflow portrayed it as a terrible tragedy. It was blamed on his car being stolen. And so they promised better security next time. And nothing really happened. They got away with it, just as they've been getting away with it time and time and time again. So into that is the kind of soil for secrecy and hierarchies to grow up and form, right? That's where you get the deeper mysteries that are only available to the loyal and to the dedicated, those who have to be initiated, but only once they have been drawn into confidence, when they've been made party to cruelty and nastiness. When they've done that and they accept it, and even if they understand that what they're doing is wrong, everything else is going to come to them a little easier. It's Cult 101. One thing to understand about Mindflow is, and I don't mean just the kind of surface level people here, the kind of people of the blow-ins, the people who turn up, the people who may go to a FlowCon once or twice. I'm talking about the real dedicated people. Once they're in, they don't really leave, and the few who do don't speak about it. They move on. They don't pine after loved ones within the cult, and they don't make a fuss. So yeah, I'm not talking about people like that poor guy who died, or the people who are getting treated like trash by bullying scumbags. I'm talking about those who are willing to do the bullying, the people who go beyond, who go a little bit deeper. They're the ones who get to hear about the first father and king. You know, the really wild stuff that they're not going to put in the ads. And I mean, I'm giving people too much credit here. I think there's people who would sign up because of the wild stuff for sure. But a few months ago, I would have thought this was silly fiction. If somebody told me about this, I'd nod along politely and then I would lose their phone number. But given that I know Mindflow is related to what's happening to me, there's truth to this too. As always, it's not the whole truth. So we have to begin with the truth that they're telling and selling to people, and then we can start pulling back the curtain to look further beyond. And I think for now I need to step away for a moment, because what I'm about to talk about is where I need to put you in the shoes of somebody who joins this cult and take you on their journey. And I need to be in the right headspace for that. I'm not in that right headspace now. I need to get myself a drink of water and just sit for a little while. I hope that you understand and appreciate that. So the next time I come back, I will delve straight into who is the first father and king and their role in the cult.